be viewed discriminatory as the love letters submitted with offers. I think that that was something that is not ever brought up, but should be, and um, perhaps questioned as to whether they should even be, that conversation should be had between all brokers and principal brokers.
Yes, and again, that's why we're starting this. You just hit on the seed for the Principal Broker Academy. It's that we want principal brokers to have those conversations and collaborate in those areas where we're all vulnerable cross company. Because you know the love letter can come from one company to another company, and then you're both sucked into that vicarious liability as the principal brokers. So excellent, excellent. Patty, you were next.
Yeah, I just think I'm the same, really. I mean, some of the fair housing stuff surprised me that I got it wrong. I was shocked. And, you know, really putting some discriminatory language into our policy. It's nothing I felt I've had to address because I'm new at having my own brokerage and because it's just my team, which is very small, you know, but really putting that discriminatory information in the policy as a protection. I think that was one thing. I think also being careful how you talk about school districts, things like that. I thought that was interesting. And I think that's it.
Well, that's great. And again, that putting your principal broker hat on and how this is information that you definitely already have knowledge of, but how do we take that information and that knowledge and utilize it from the management level and making sure that our people are in compliance? So anybody else have any aha moments or things that they said, oh, I better go make a little tweak or a change on that?
I do.
Oh, Lisa.
Hi. So yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing with me that we stopped doing because of COVID was doing more implementing and training on contracts. And so I was mainly handling with my agents by texting me going, hey, what about this? And then we get on a quick Zoom call and we talk about it. But implementing training. And so we started that up again, and we created a plan that if we're not safe, we do it via Zoom or, you know, but getting back on that schedule. And that was really fun to have a first class of getting back into going over contracts again.
Great. Chelsea, I see you've got your mic open.
Yeah. So, you know, it's funny because we talked a lot. I mean, you said that the entire class, you talked about policy. It always goes back to policy. You know, and I have a really small brokerage, just a few brokers. And so I put, you know, the policy and procedure manual that I have for my brokers, again, obviously reach out to OAR, have a lot of resources to create that. But to be real honest, I didn't really think much more about my policies and procedures. And so just after that, I definitely have started to dive into that manual. I'm going to look at things and tweak it, you know, make it a little bit better, use different verbiage and things like that. It was just something that it registered that it is a lot more important than maybe I had even thought it was.
Exactly. And because your policies and procedures become as a managing, supervising principal broker, it becomes your defensible position.
Yep.
When faced with, if one of your agents have a complaint filed against them, then you can say, well, they were acting outside my policy. Here's where I've done training on that. You know, keep it, like we talked about, keeping records of the training schedule that you do and what you train on. That becomes your defensible position and your documentation of supervision in compliance with the Oregon regulations and law. So great. Did anybody else go back to their policies and procedures after we talked about it? And what was the other word we used quite often with, you know, it's policies and procedures, training, and what was the third one?
Defensible.
Yes, and consistency, that you're consistent throughout and that you train your agents to be consistent with how they work with and interact with clients. That training, policies and procedures, and consistency were the three things in everything we talked about, we kept going back to. So we want to keep moving along here because with doing this on Zoom, we're actually, in addition to not being live, we're consolidating 8 hours of topic into 6. So today we're going to make up some time and just get moving here. So who remembers where we left off last week?
I don't.
I know, I was like, oh my goodness, where did we leave off? Because we were moving along.
We were at advertising. I think we just moved into
I think we
advertising.
finished advertising. So in your handout, we finished on page 19, because we talked about advertising and Facebook and all those kinds of things. So we got through that. So my notes say that we left off at principal brokers and continuing transactions if you transfer to another company, and what your responsibilities are as a principal broker, and do you allow it? And so we're in the manual. Let me see where that was. This is on page 17. That's where we are now. And yes, we have a lot of pages left in your manual, but a lot of that is resource materials. Remember, we talked about that last week. Don't hyperventilate if we're not exactly following the manual, because a lot of that is resource materials for you. And let's see here in chat. Is there, Sonia? Yes, there is a template available for policy manuals. Sonia asked the question. Yes, in OAR, go on the website, the Oregon Association of Realtors, and there are templates for a lot of that type of thing. So yes, there is some really good information in there about that. So let's talk now about principal brokers and the continuation of a transaction when you transfer companies. So, why isn't this working? Here we go. Okay, so if this says a principal broker, but it also applies to brokers. Okay, so if a broker under your supervision is moving to another company under the supervision of a different principal broker, Oregon law was amended a few years ago to allow that transaction to transfer with the agent to the new company. However, there is documentation that needs to be signed. And in your resources, we gave you a sample of where the seller, the buyer, the old principal broker, and the current principal broker all are required to sign a letter transferring the supervision of that transaction. Now, it's a company policy decision here if you're going to allow that, and should be part of your independent contractor agreement with your brokers that determines when they exit your company, what is your policy on whether or not those transactions transfer with them or stay with you to complete the transaction. Our policy is we let them take them. The challenge with that, because we don't want to hold anybody hostage because of a transaction or a listing, you know, I believe that, you know, let it go, bless them, love on them, say thank you, and let them go on. But you also still maintain some liability. So just make sure your policy again determines how you're going to handle that. The let's see here. My slides don't want to move very fast. There we go. So you have to have the client both. You have to have the client's documented approval, which is both the buyer and the seller, the written agreement, which I just said. The agreement must identify which principal broker is remaining responsible, identify the transaction, state the effective date, address agency relationship. And here's the thing, specify how compensation will be handled. If here's where some misinformation out there. When a transaction is created while an agent is under your supervision and you keep that transaction and they move to another company, you are still legally able to pay them directly for that transaction. So in this instance, don't confuse compensation with supervision. Okay, so they can move it on. Somebody else can supervise them and you can still compensate them, and that's okay and with Oregon law. Any questions on that?
So Deborah, is there for the broker to be compensated too, you know, when you take part of the commission, when they're in your agency, is that also something to be directly addressed?
You want to address that in your independent contractor agreement. Your independent contractor agreement should always include, I call it like a prenup, that, you know, if we part ways, your compensation will, you've got choices here, either remain the same, will be, I've seen them where it says it reverts back to a different number, or there's a referral paid back. Those are all negotiable between you and your agent that you're bringing on at the time of the independent contractor agreement. So when they depart, then it's already determined what that's going to be. So you're not having that negotiation, if you will, should they decide to transfer to another company. And the reverse is true. If you have somebody transferring into your company, you want to have that conversation with them of what determines their departure from the other company is based on their independent contractor agreement with that company, that you have no say or no supervision over that decision. So you want to make sure that they've had that conversation with their existing principal broker. But the answer to your question is yes, when you have your independent contractor agreement drafted, you should make sure that there's the prenup part of it, if you will, that we love you, but if you leave, here's what the steps are, or what the rules are. So, and the independent contractor agreement that OAR has as a sample, I believe is in your resources, but if not, it is online with the Oregon, on the OAR site. So. Okay, any questions on that, on transferring the transactions? Again, we go back to policy, right? Training and consistency. So trust account reconciliation issues. I think we determined last week that none of you actually have trust accounts anymore. Is that correct? Or if you do, you're in the process of no longer having a trust account. We talked about the liability that goes along with the trust account and the reconciliation and the time that's spent on it. And that a lot of companies no longer have trust accounts. They utilize the title companies for deposits of earnest monies. Now, if you're property management, that's different. Under property management, you're required to have a trust account for obvious reasons. So I'm going to skip through this. Some of the issues with trust accounts, again, this goes back to property management, are the security deposits. Some of the business, the largest malfunction or misappropriation of funds has happened in the property management world. Some of the largest criminal cases on misappropriation of trust account monies has been in the property management side of our business. And there's quite a few cases on record that you can take a look at if that really is of interest. So there, I'm going to skip through these. Sorry, Carol, I know I'm not supposed to do this. Carol's been my instruction coach as well, so I love having her in the room. The biggest challenge also in where we've seen issues with trust accounts is commingling, where a broker will come short out on their operation account and then they decide, well, they'll just borrow from the client's trust account, and then it gets all muddled, and that's where a lot of issues arise in the property management world. Yeah, not holding your personal or business funds separate. If you do make a mistake, you want to correct it quickly. Okay, that's the end of trust accounts. Any questions or comments? Okay, we got through that one like we just made up about a half an hour, okay? Woohoo! So supervising advertising. Okay, this is as a managing principal broker, this is probably one of our most challenging areas of supervision. Would you guys agree? Those of you that are supervising.
I just spent about 9 years at a company. I don't ever remember them looking at my advertising. I just have to say.
Well, that's interesting, since according to the Oregon real estate rules, for supervision, one of your primary responsibilities other than contract review is advertising review. That is, and that is where most of the complaints are filed in the real estate agency by, well, actually, most of them are filed by an agent against another agent, because the consumer really doesn't know or pay attention.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the recent things we came across was where an agent from a different company was collecting listing pictures or pictures of listings, putting them on their Facebook and advertising them as their properties, and then having the public have do you want to view these properties that I have? If you do, please contact me via Facebook, without getting permission from any of the listing agents.
Well, that is a violation.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way anyone can advertise anyone else's listings is with written permission from both the seller or the owners of the property and the principal broker, not just the agent. Okay,
Correct.
Remember, you guys, as principal brokers, there's certain things that you as the principal broker have the only authority to do, because you, the principal broker, and the company are the owners of the listing, not the agent. Okay, so you're the ones that have to approve and maintain that supervision over that type of advertising. But that's a great, we've seen that. We've actually had a couple of recent complaints brought to our attention where other agents were just hacking other agents' listings. And again, this is one of those things, is managing principal brokers. that is an issue that may not have been an issue a year ago, but it's a market-driven issue. You're gonna, you need to be very fluid in your supervision, because as the market changes, some of the things that'll come up, like the love letters. Remember, we talked about those, that we weren't seeing those for a long time. And now that it's a very competitive market, as managing principal brokers, you got to kind of be ahead of those curves and make sure that you're directing your agents accordingly. So,
Deborah, the IDXs that you have that put everybody's listings
Hello,
on
it's Randy.
I'm sorry?
Randy, turn your mic off.
I'm in this class, so.
Randy, turn your mic off.
And, the people broke.
Okay, so I'm asking about IDXs, because that's what they do, is they scoop the MLS and put it on your website. So,
but you've given them permission when you put in your listings, you give permission for them to go through an IDX feed. That's different than an individual agent sucking or taking others listings individually. That's
so those that didn't give permission to have an IDX feed wouldn't come through on your website then?
That's correct.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
Another thing, Deborah, I think that we've experienced here in Klamath County has to do with photographs, who owns them. And when you have photos in the MLS especially, sometimes you have people that the listing doesn't sell and another broker or brokerage takes it over, and they want to capture those photos out of that previous listing. And who do those photos belong to, especially if you're using a professional photographer?
Absolutely. And you're right, Randy, that is when you're taking a listing, you want to make clear to your seller, because we've had situations where the seller has gone ahead and pulled, listings and copies of pictures and given them to their agent, and they didn't have the authority to do that. So it's really important when your agents are using pictures in their MLS that the source of the pictures are known and supervised, that no copyright violations have occurred with the use of those pictures. And NAR, again, if you just go on NAR and type in listing picture copyrights, there's tons of articles on that. But again, being mindful that a picture isn't just a picture. It has legal ramifications to it as well. Good point, Randy. Thank you.
Yeah,
so when
Patty Millen, I'm surprised at what you said, because in most of the offices that I've been involved with, that ad doesn't go anywhere until it goes across the principal broker's desk.
I've never had a brokerage, except for my first brokerage back in the 90s, really look at my advertising.
Oh, that's interesting.
Not that you're a bad advertiser, but that's kind of scary right there.
I mean, they do if somebody complains or something like that. And I've complained to the brokerage about agents doing signage where you can't hardly see who the brokerage is, and stuff. And, and then they changed the policy on that. But I think that, and maybe they do. Maybe they have somebody scanning my stuff. I don't know. I've just never had any direct interactions.
Yeah, and in my office's case, Coldwell Banker, which that's my office's Coldwell Banker office, there's corporate standards that have to be met also.
Well, yeah, we have that. We have to have the John L. Scott swoosh on our signs and things like that.
Right.
With over 300 agents in my office here in Oregon, we actually have we actually have 3 actively full-time managing brokers. I'm one of them, but we about a year ago implemented that only one of them is monitoring advertising. Everything goes through him, and he actually saves it. We have a file that he saves it to as well. And of course we have corporate and agency rules and MLS rules, those things. But we actually decided we better just have one person be in charge of that, just so we can keep track.
Yeah,
How do
that's
you-
a great point, Heather.
I have a question. I'm sorry. How do you know if
Well, that's
all of
why
that advertising is being run through you or
okay.
not?
Well, there you just
Policy.
opened my next comment. Thank you for that. Oregon law says that it is the individual broker's responsibility to keep proof of approval of advertising by their principal broker. So
Okay.
as the principal broker, you're not even held to the responsibility of maintaining records of approval of advertising. It's the individual agent's responsibility.
That's huge.
So if we had a situation where one of my agents was, a complaint was filed and it was in violation, his advertising was in violation, and he could not provide proof that we had approved that advertising. So from a supervisory standpoint, we were okay, but he got a little bit of an education slap on the hand because he had not submitted that advertising for approval. And again, it is in our policies and procedures. This is what you will do for advertising. So again, make sure your policies and procedures are clear on what your agent's responsibilities are as far as getting the advertising to you. And you can approve templates as long as they're not changing substantially the wording. Don't forget that your MLS listing public remarks are considered advertising, so you have to review and approve those before they go public. And that is where we find most often violations of fair housing is in the MLS remarks. And that is your responsibility to supervise that, is in because that has a fair housing component to it. So hopefully, as a managing supervising principal broker, you are reviewing all of the MLS marketing remarks, because those do in fact fall under advertising. And so you want to make sure you're doing that. So it's also important to make sure that you're not misleading or deceptive. And that gets back to the listing thing. Remember where you were saying somebody was taking listings and advertising them? That is misrepresentation, because it looks to the public like you're advertising those as yours. So that is definitely misrepresentation. So do you have the broker's permission? Does the broker have written permission from the property owner? The listing agreement is permission to advertise, because it says it right in there in most of the MLS agreements. Now here's where we get the most complaints at the real estate agency. And that is is the broker's name on the ad, and is it their licensed name? Okay, it has to be their licensed name, or a common derivation or a common derivative of the licensed name. So you want to make sure that the name is correct. And the second part of that, and this is where, is the company's registered business name. Remember the RBN that we talked about last week is the RBN, and the words that the real estate agency uses, is it obvious and apparent, especially on signs? Is it obvious and apparent who the real estate company is that the agent works for? So at this point, the real estate agency has not given us what that size is or what that ratio is. But at first glance, is it obvious and apparent who the company is and who the agent is? And I encourage, don't make your signs too busy. Have the company name, a phone number, and the agent's name, because that's all the consumer's looking for. But again, and that's one of the areas where we get a lot of complaints because of teams. And the team name being more obvious and apparent than the company name. Because remember, a team is not, a team name is not an RBN, is not a registered business name. So in that, you have to make sure that you're not appearing to the public that the team is the company. And that's where we get a lot of complaints. So here's, yeah, is the real estate company's registered business name prominently displayed and immediately noticeable? And our former real estate commissioner, Gene Bentley, used to actually drive around and look for signs to see if they were in compliance. Our current real estate commissioner who was a former real estate agent, is not doing that, but we do get complaints from other agents as they're driving around. Some agents are apparently not busy enough to mind their own business. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so now we're going to jump into team advertising. And I think I've covered that quite a bit as we've been talking about advertising. So what is advertising? Where is it? Mail, telephone, internet, email. Make sure your agent's email signatures are correct. We do a quarterly audit where we have every agent send us an email so that we can verify that their email signature line is in legal compliance. Their recording on their voicemail is advertising. Does that say that mine says, hi, this is Deborah Gisrael, the managing principal broker for eXp Realty for Oregon. So that when my phone message is relayed to someone, it's clear and apparent that I am in fact a licensed real estate broker in the state of Oregon. So those are areas where you also want to make sure that you're obvious and apparent. Also remember that you have to state anything that's going on the internet has to say that you're licensed in Oregon. And it can say you're a licensed Oregon broker or licensed in the state of Oregon. So somewhere in all of your online marketing, it needs to say that you are licensed in the state of Oregon.
Deborah,
Yes, ma'am.
can you have licensed Oregon license number, and that would be sufficient to show that you're licensed in Oregon, or does it actually have to say licensed in the state of Oregon?
Well, you can say Oregon broker, licensed in Oregon. Oregon law does not require you to have your license number in your advertising. That is not required. Some states do. Oregon does not require that. So as long as it's clear to the public that you're an Oregon broker. Mine just says Oregon principal broker. So yeah, just so it's clear. You don't have to say in the state of Oregon, but just so that it's clear that it's Oregon. So one of the areas that in the electronic world that us as principal brokers, sorry, that was poor English grammar, but for those of us that are supervising advertising, what do you do when your agents are going live, like on Facebook Live? How do you pre-approve something that's live? So we actually, I see Gwen shaking her head and smiling. So, you know, we are being held to a law that was written prior to the internet, where advertising supervision or approval, what you usually had a lead time, like Randy and I down in Klamath Falls, you know, we both advertise in pretty much the same publications. And, you know, you would get your proofs on Thursday for the Sunday paper, and you had Thursday to review them, and then you turn them in. Whereas now you've got an agent out there who turns on their Facebook account, and boom, they're advertising, and you don't even know about it. So how do you manage that? Or how are any of you doing that?
Is that something that you really want to specify in your policies and procedures on how to handle a Facebook Live, and in your policy manual discuss how they should conduct themselves? I mean, that would be one way to protect us, maybe.
Absolutely, Chelsea, and you just hit it, because you know we can have a policy says that if you're doing Facebook Live, you will meet this criteria, and go from there. So
Can you do like a template that they must follow in your policy? Yeah.
and again, training. Excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat. Training, policy, so that, you know, if you've got a rogue agent out there and they're just going helter-skelter with what they're doing, you can show your defensible position of, here's our training, here's our policy on that. Excuse me. Yeah, they're both an NAR and OIR. So how we doing, guys? This one, actually the broker is responsible for keeping a record of approval of advertising. While most principal brokers do, like Heather mentioned, you know, their reviewing broker for advertising keeps a copy. We do keep a copy for a short period of time, but we don't archive advertising approval because we're not required to. But the individual agents are required to keep their approvals. And of course, they should also be putting them in their listing files.
Excuse me, I didn't understand what you just said. It seemed to contradict itself.
What did I say? I do that often. No.
No, you don't. This is a wonderful course, amazing. But I thought what you just said is that the principal broker has to have that on hand if the agency wants to see it. But then you said you just keep yours for a short time.
No, the individual licensee, the individual agent is who's required to keep the records. We need to correct that slide because it should say brokers are required.
Oh, okay. So I'm not required as a principal broker to keep it.
As a principal broker, no, you're not required to, but it's a good business practice, good to do so. But the law does not specifically say you, it says the broker.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So electronic advertising, including emails, blogs, must be approved just like all other advertising. And you know, I'm impressed with Heather's company that they have one person that just does all the advertising approval. That's really good. Okay, so we've covered a lot of this. The license name, the principal broker has to be in there, a statement that you're licensed in Oregon. The brokers, as long as it comes up on the first or second page of your advertising, you're good to go there. Okay, team advertising. This is a big issue nationally right now with team advertising. Thank you, Carol. You're awesome. I will see you next Friday. I'm gonna stalk you next Friday. See ya. Bye, my friend. We'll take a 5-minute break on the hour. Is that good for everybody? Somebody asked for me to announce the break time. So on the hour, we will take a break. It's 9:45, so we'll take a 5-minute break at 10. Do I have an amen on that? Okay, so team advertising. Oh my goodness. Where do I start? So the identification of teams versus the RBN or the company name is really front and center now nationally. And let me give you a couple of things that we're finding that some states have done, and Oregon will probably follow suit at some point in the future because Commissioner Strode has put together an advertising task force. Because remember I said that our advertising rules are archaic because they were written prior to the internet and electronic advertising. So Commissioner Strode has put together an advertising work group to review and revise and recommend to the legislature an updating of our rules and laws regarding advertising. And one of the things that is a topic of discussion is teams, team names, team identity, team supervision. And here's one that California and several other states have outlawed or have said that you cannot use the words realty or real estate or property in a team name. Okay, so this is something now, if you have teams, for example, we have one, the Eugene Realty Group. Okay, right now in Oregon, that is legal to have a team name that has those words in them. But I want you to anticipate a future date when that may not be allowed. So when we have new agents come on board or new teams come on board, we encourage them to amend, to change their team names to not have the words real estate, real property, realty in their team names. And California was the first state to actually pass legislation disallowing the use of those words in a team name. The theory behind that being that it misleads the public into thinking that the team is actually a company and not a team within the company. The other thing is supervision. It's very prudent, while not required directly under Oregon law, it is a good idea that if you have teams, that they have a principal broker as a member of the team, so that there is someone on the team who is legally supervising the activities of that team. Now, we've implemented a policy that if you're going to have a team, the team leader doesn't have to be the principal broker, but the team, in order to be kind of an autonomous working group under the RBN, they have to have a supervising principal broker for that team. So what, you guys, let's talk about that for a minute. Why does that make good sense?
Well, so Deborah, is that if there's a principal broker on a team, then who's ultimately responsible for what that team does?
You are the head dog. So you're giving them some supervisory control, but the buck still goes all the way back up to whoever the one supervising principal broker that the real estate agency says you're the one. Like Randy, that would be you. For my company, that would be me. If you're the designated or the managing principal broker, all of the supervision, even if it's under another supervising principal broker, it all trickles up to that one person.
And if you have an agreement with this principal broker that's on the team, that they are the designated principal broker for that team, that does not change the liability.
No. It's called shared supervision, and we actually have provided for you a document in your resources that is the shared supervision. You cannot abdicate any of your supervisory responsibility as the, even though the real estate agency doesn't have a designation for those roles, the real estate agency, whoever that one person is that is the responsible person on the RBN registration, is where the buck stops on everything. And if you have principal brokers below, also, you do the shared supervision agreement, but the ultimate responsibility always goes up to that managing principal broker who is listed on the RBN documentation as the responsible principal broker. So, make sense?
Where's that document at, Deborah, that you were just speaking of?
It's called shared supervision, and it's in it's in the handout somewhere.
Okay.
Because we provided it's let me see here. There's a sample of an independent contractor agreement. Let's see, here we go. It's on page 81 of your handout.
Thank you.
And, like for instance, I'm sure Heather's company have multiple principal brokers. Like in my company, I have over 40 licensed principal brokers, but not all of them are supervising. And all of them are not actually, most of them are not even supervising themselves. So moving forward with whatever the real estate agency does legislatively, that's where we are right now. So you should know who, if you're not that person, you need to know who's the person in your company who is responsible for that RBN, because that's going to tell you where the buck stops, that one name. Any questions? Can I hear an amen? Are you there? Everybody there? Everybody wave? We gotcha. This is hard without being in front of you. I'm so interactive and
You're doing great.
this is a whole different world for me right now. So
it's like being a stand-up comic in an empty room, isn't it?
it is. I know because I'm such an interactive instructor, and and I read. It's hard, but we're doing it. That's the awesome thing. We're doing it and we're getting through it. Doing it and getting through it. So we'll take a break in a minute. I want to team advertising. If you're advertising team members who are not licensed, you have to make that clear to the public. Okay, what the case that made this become part of what we teach is a team had this marketing piece, and it had like 10 people on this team, and it was identified as the ABC Realty team, but only 2 of them were licensed. And so it presented to the public a picture that was not true. So the team or group must include at least 1 licensed broker. Now the law doesn't say they have to be a principal broker, but we encourage it. The broker members of the team or group are associated with the same principal broker. Okay, so you can't have a team that some of the team are on with one company and the rest of the team are with another company. We actually had that situation where these 2 agents were promoting themselves as a team in their marketing and advertising, and yet they were licensed with 2 different companies. So y'all know, of course, when that complaint was filed, that they had to cease and desist doing that because they were not with the same company. Same broker, same RBN. If any non-licensed individuals are named in the advertising, remember it must be clearly stated who's licensed and who isn't. The advertising complies with all other advertising. Okay, here's the, this is a good breakout group that we would normally do. But instead, we're going to give you a break now. We're going to take 5 minutes. We'll be back. Let's see, what time is it? It's 9:54. So we'll be back at 10 a.m. on the money. Does that work? You don't mind that I'm giving you your break 5 minutes earlier than we said, right? Okay, so be back and think about this. What is your current advertising policy as it exists today? Okay?
Hey, Deborah, this is Holly.
Hi, Holly.
Hi, I'm so sorry I joined the group late. My apologies for the travel. I have a question for you about the handout. Was there something that was sent out earlier this week for today? You
Yes,
mentioned
yes, there was. It went out yesterday.
Okay, I cannot find it in any of my emails. So should I just contact Katie directly?
Katie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, okay, Katie, can you resend that the handout to Holly?
Yeah,
The one that
absolutely. I'm
went out
sending it right now.
yesterday? Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, hey, Katie, this is Randy Shaw. I did not get the initial invite for the class. So, and I went through my emails 3 times and did not see. So would you check and see if I'm on the list so that so you'll be sending that to me in the future?
Yeah, I have you on the list. I'm not sure why you didn't get it.
Okay. Well, I'm not either. I don't have a spam folder, so that it couldn't have gone there. But yeah, but that's okay. I mean, I called up at OAR, and you'll have a message from me on your message machine, and got piped in. But okay, I'll watch out.
You did get my email from this morning though, correct?
Yeah, I did. That brought me
Okay,
in.
good.
That's what brought me into the class.
Okay, good, good.
And wasn't the handout attached to that one, Katie?
Yes, the handout was attached to that email.
Yeah, because last week we had sent you sent 4 handouts, and we weren't sure which one we were using I wasn't even sure. So the one that we sent out is the one that we're all following today, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back. Okay, so we know that it's your responsibility to supervise advertising. Discuss the steps to be followed before an ad can be placed on social media. That comes under your policy. Remember to make sure that your policy says something to the effect of, prior to any public advertising, our company policy is that it be submitted to the principal broker, either in electronic form, whatever yours is going to be. And that should be in your policy and procedures manual. And there's really good wording on that at NAR, because this is a moving target. The social media, the Twitter, all of the stuff that agents are using, that just because of the speed of which it's done and the speed of which the consumer expects to receive it, that there's not always time to do that. And I'm foreseeing a time that managing principal brokers are going to be still accountable, but less accountable for the actual in the moment things that the agents do. That it's just humanly and physically and time-wise impossible for you to manage. So, okay, here's a quick scenario, you guys. As you're enjoying your morning coffee like you are right now, a broker in your office comes in to share their brilliant idea for an advertise. And it's amazing how creative y'all are. Oh my goodness. Some of the things I get from some of my agents, I wonder what they were drinking when they wrote that. But somebody comes in and they share their brilliant idea for an advertising campaign.
As they show you the obviously expensive mock-up of the campaign, you almost spit your coffee out. The issue becomes evident. Marketing to only single white females under the age of 35 without children. Do y'all see the red flag here? See the fair housing? The agent thought this was niche marketing. So see the difference between niche marketing and violating fair housing? So that it's an untapped market. So what would you say to your agent? What would you say, anybody?
It sounds like it's time to go to some fair housing classes.
Yes. Okay, so there you go. So the two things, policy, should your policy address, making sure your training, policy, training, and consistency. The good news is they brought it to you for approval before they sent it out. That's the good news. So they were following policy in that regard. So as a managing principal broker, this identifies for you a teachable moment. Would you agree? And one of the things that really good managing principal brokers do is they always look for the opportunities for teachable moments. And a phrase my agents hear me use all the time because they roll their eyes is, okay, what was the lesson learned? What was the lesson learned? And what will you do differently next time?
I have a question about the female expert marketer, the tagline. And that is also violating fair housing rules?
Well, it's not, you're identifying yourself. So the phrase by itself, I'm a female marketer expert. Well, yeah, you're a woman and you're a marketing expert. But they were identifying it as a class that's protected that they were marketing to.
Okay.
Do you see that?
I do see that. I was just wondering about the tagline, if that was actually, so if the ad didn't say a marketing to single women age 35 without children, but they took a tagline saying female expert marketer, that would not violate fair housing rules?
I think it would be crossing the line because it indicates that you're marketing to a protected class.
I agree too, but I mean, I'm just saying, should somebody, yeah, I agree. It crosses the line.
I think it crosses the line. If one of my agents brought that to me, I would have a teaching moment and say, let's rethink this. And as you know, even recently, Facebook has been pretty aggressive on that kind of niche marketing that in any way is niche marketing that could be class or any kind of protected class violation. No. But again, teachable moment, make sure it's covered in your policies and procedures and be consistent. Okay, terms and conditions. Disclaimers. This is advertising disclaimer. This is basically, in your listing agreement where it says information not guaranteed, that's what we mean by a disclaimer. It appears on marketing material and other media. It makes clear it is by a real estate professional. Most of them are typically placed at the bottom of the advertising, your MLS printouts, have it at the bottom. Attorney written disclaimers. Most of our disclaimers are written by attorneys. This is where I say copy, steal, and paste, where, if you see a well-written disclaimer, like on the bottom of your MLSs, those are great ones. And here's a good one that we suggest, and it says that you have made every effort to obtain the information regarding the listing sources reliable. However, you're not warranting or the accuracy. And even your purchase and sale agreement takes this to a next level where it puts the due diligence responsibility pretty clear. What are other disclaimers you feel should be included in brokerage marketing? I think you guys are pretty pretty astute on that. Any questions on it? Because I'm going to try to make up some time here, but wave me down or jump up and down if you have any questions.
Deborah, sorry,
Yeah.
This is Holly again. So as a newbie and who's not a PB yet, I do have a question about that. What do you know that I don't know about additional disclaimers?
Well, I can't name any additional ones because everything that we're using has one. So, you know, your disclaimer for advertising is for the most important one is on your MLS. You know.
I have a disclaimer on mine because I had a situation where I had written identification through an email that the offer had been accepted and they were only waiting for the other party to sign. But the other party was in agreement. Here's a written statement that my offer was accepted. A better offer came in that afternoon and they tried to renege and say, well, the other person hadn't signed. My person got the house because I had it in writing, but it made me aware that sometimes you write things in email that may be misconstrued as acceptance when they're not. So at the bottom of my emails, it said no message. Well, it's basically, I can't quote it for you word for word. I've had it so long, but that anything written in an email basically is not to be considered an offer. Only executed signed documents are, because I could see myself getting into that position as that person had. So
Good
that's
point.
one.
And Holly, to answer your question one step further, another example would be on our email, we require that you have the confidentiality disclaimer and the wire fraud disclaimer on your emails. So that's another example of where you might use a disclaimer. So do y'all know what I'm talking about when on your email signature block, you have the confidentiality block and the wire fraud that, you know, you're never going to send them something that, you know, that they can't verify before they send money, that particular one. Okay. Transaction closing issues. So as you know, as the managing principal broker, you're usually brought in when things become a problem. So we're going to talk a little bit about trying to keep the deal together and rectifying when issues come up. Parties feeling abused during the process. We're going to talk about that. I think the most important thing as a managing principal broker for you to convey to your agents is they are not a party to the transaction. They're not that damned important. You know, they are not the decision makers. They are the facilitators. And the other thing that I really stress with agents is that you can advocate on behalf of your client without being adversarial. And, you know, and you want to make that
Thank
a
you.
part of your culture, as that, you know, yes, your job is to, and this comes from the top down. And I know when I reach out to call another principal broker because an agent has had the kind of behavior that is adversarial rather than advocating, that it usually comes from the top, and that's the culture of the company. So, you know, as leaders in your companies, you set the tone, you set the culture. And, you know, you want to be training your agents that, yes, they play a very valuable, vital role in the transaction, but they are not a party to the transaction. They are not a decision maker. They are not going to make decisions on what the seller sees or doesn't see. Those types of things. So make sure that you're communicating that from the top down. So advocate without being adversarial. And you're not that important that you can act like a party to the transaction. And you all know what I'm talking about. I don't have to go into detail of that agent. You know that agent. You know who they are. You can probably, you're getting a visual of that one agent that you know in your market that's their behavior. Patty, Mike, yeah.
I just wanted to say that, yeah, I don't like doing business that way. Nobody likes doing business that way. And, you know, I've had several things, and I think maybe the lockdown has just like sort of antagonized people's personalities or something, but, you know, where people are being very adversarial. And I think the question is, you know, hey, do you have a beef with me? Or, you know, but usually I'll just say, you know, this feels very adversarial. In fact, the other day I said to somebody, you know, I've had 3 transactions with you in the last 6 months, and all of them, you were very pointed, very adversarial, very attacking. And I don't do business that way, and I'm not willing to do it anymore. So I'm going to ask you to change your stance so that this can be pleasant. This is what we do every day. And they were shocked, but they changed. And they were very respectful, and the transaction went great after that. But it creates very unnecessary fatigue and bad feelings. And I'm just telling people I'm not going to participate at that level. And they're backing off, and it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I said, it comes from the top down. It's how you build your company culture, how you train your agents. You know, we do a hot topics every week in my office, and we'll have, you know, a large turnout of agents because we talk about what are the hot topics that happened this week in the industry? What are we doing, you know, to address that? And so, you know, having those types of collaborative experiences within your office helps to create that culture so that they're not being that agent. And, you know, my grandfather said, you know, used to say, kill them with kindness. So what I find is that, you know, like you were, Patty, you know, the meaner they are, the more mean-spirited they are, the nicer I become, you know, and they don't know how to deal with that. So again, it starts with us, and it'll trickle down. And the more principal brokers that take the academy and they get that level of experience and learning from each other, we're going to see it start to spread around the industry. But it has to start with us as the principal brokers, and creating that intercompany culture of why we're here. So, sorry, I didn't mean to preach, but I have pretty strong feelings on that one. I went too fast here. Okay, closing issues on transactions that you're going to usually hear about. And we all get those calls. I know, you know, and we all hate to make those calls where you have to pick up the phone and call the other principal broker and you say, gosh, you know, we've got a situation. How can we work it out? And this is where your leadership style in handling this will trickle down. And when it escalates to where a situation within a transaction escalates to the principal broker to principal broker, and remember, you never want to, as the principal broker, be communicating with the broker of another company. You want to go principal broker to principal broker. You never want to go principal broker to broker of another company. I I've oftentimes had a or a broker from another company call me about something, and I'll say, you know, I'd really love to help you, but I really need your principal broker to call me because you're not that agent's supervisor. Do you guys see where I'm going with this? You know, you don't want to be educating, reprimanding, yelling at another principal broker's agents. So where do we run in?
Oh, Deborah, I'm sorry. There
Go
was a thing here that says, did not maintain due diligence in eliminating title obstacles like exceptions, liens, and environmental discoveries. I just want to comment about agents going out and listing agents that have been in my agency previously would make a point of finding out information that was obscure, and it made it very difficult on the seller. So that would be interesting to me as to, once they come to our attention, of course we work with them, but do we go out and seek them or allow our agents to go out and dig deep into? I mean, it seems to me like it's a good practice to make sure they know everything, but in one case it created an inability for any transaction to move forward. And it was done adversarial. It was a teaching moment, but I'm just curious about how much responsibility they should be taking on.
Well, I'm going to give you the words that are in the law, and it says that your agent and you are responsible for that what a prudent, the word is prudent, investigation would reveal. It doesn't mean you're a radon inspector, doesn't mean you're a roofing inspector or a home inspector, but that which a prudent investigation would reveal is the standard. We're not surveyors. We are not, those are outside our scope of our fiduciary responsibilities to our client. So keeping those words in mind, prudent investigation. If you see obvious red flags, then you have a duty to prudent investigation and disclosure.
So in this case, like something like property lines unidentified, buyer to do due diligence, would that be?
Means the buyer needs to hire someone who
Right,
has expertise
right.
in that area.
But you don't go out and find out all this ancient stuff. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Remember last week we said be the source of the source? Be the source of the person who will be the person who to resolve that. But you never want your agents to be determining property lines or easement lines or anything like that. And you want to train them to use words. It appears, according to this, that it's probably over there. However, if that's important to you, you should hire a surveyor to make sure that that's where the lines are. So hear my words there, you guys.
I had one yesterday. One of the things about Facebook is you can belong to groups of agents that aren't necessarily part of your company, some of those Club Wealth and some of those things, which by the way, advise your agents in your office not to take advice from other realtors on the internet. But anyway, one of them was on there. I mean, that's huge. I'm like, they think it's on there on Facebook and it's true. And a lot of them are interstate. There are different states, and different states have different laws. So I have to point that out to our agents. But yesterday, one of them was asking if any agents in Oregon in the Willamette Valley area knew someone who had a metal detector because they needed to take their client out so they could find property pins for their client. And I was like, oh my gosh. And 4 or 5 other agents on there actually said, oh yeah, I have one you can borrow, or this person has one you can borrow. And I'm like, stop, go talk to your managing broker right now.
You're right, Heather. And what if they're wrong? I mean, what if there's I know in a lot of the rural areas, there might be pins that were pins from 10 times prior to the current property lines.
Right. We're constantly saying that's outside of the scope of your license, outside of the scope of your license.
Exactly, Heather. And again, our agents, they're so wanting to help, but they're helping themselves into liability, which is helping you become liable, that vicarious liability. You know, that's so is where you are. Okay, where are we? Okay, what are some of the issues again that we come across as managing principal brokers, where the sky is falling and the world is coming to an end? You know, is no clear timelines and last minute schedule changes. Okay, we deal with it. But what I train my agents is, when is the time to make a clear timeline? And I encourage writing a letter to the other agent, the co-op agent, saying, look forward to work. And this is where you create that beginning of that cooperative and advocacy on behalf of your client, but with being cooperative. And I would always send a letter or an email to the other agent and say, I look forward to working with you. Based on my calculation, these are our timelines. Are you in agreement? Rather than getting to the day of the timeline coming up and then you guys are debating it because one of you didn't count a holiday or one of you didn't start counting on the correct day, and you've got a day difference. Can a day's difference make a difference for your client and violation of the purchase and sale agreement? Absolutely. So the time to train your agents to make clear timelines so that you're not the one, when it comes to the time of the dispute, having to deal with it. So this is a time to be very proactive to avoid that particular closing issue with your agents. So that, you know, I'm a big advocate of love letters between agents, but not love letters from a client. And when I say love letters from an agent, it's when you get that deal signed tonight, and in the morning you send out an email to the other agent saying, gosh, I'm really looking forward to bringing this to a satisfactory close for our clients. Based on my review of everything, this is what I've put down as our timelines. Does this match yours? And you don't do it from a preachy standpoint. You do it from a cooperative language. Don't make the language be dictatorial, like, here's what it is. You know, start the tone of cooperation early on. Yeah, did not maintain due diligence. I think we talked about that one. But where we come up, gosh, I can't tell you how many times this has happened recently, but where title issues come up. And one of the things that you want to encourage your agents is to make sure that when their buyer or seller get that title, the title report, that they're reviewing it, that they're actually looking at it. Okay. And seeing if there's any red flags in it. Not that they fix it, but you know, you do have a duty to make sure that your clients have reviewed the prelim, so that you've got that. And we actually, as part of our policy, when they turn those in, we ask that the clients initial the prelim as part of the transaction, and that'll help to avoid that. What's the next one here? Legal description, you know, that again, the address is usually sufficient. How many of you have ever had an agent sell the wrong property? I have. It was a lot. They put the wrong lot number down, went all the way through to closing. Guess what? They bought the wrong lot. Who caught it? Nobody. Not even the title company, because it was one number off. It was lot 11. And it was lot 17. Now, we represented the buyer and we went off the information that was on the listing agreement, which was lot 11. So everything went all the way through. And then there was this, oops, we just bought the wrong lot. So that cost us some money and E&O. So again, double check your legal descriptions. Moving along. Prepayment penalties, lender delays. all of these are not reporting to the agency, trust account, improper use of a drone. These are a list of some issues.
Deborah, I have a
Yes.
question. Some of the issue, just within general, if you could speak on this topic, that would be helpful. In our tight inventory, one of the things that I'm seeing over and over again, as far as writing up in the purchase and sale agreement or on the listing, is subject to seller finding replacement property. No timelines, no nothing. Could you speak on that? What type of protocol you would put there? I believe it should always have a timeline. They should know what they're aiming for and not leaving it open-ended, but I just see this over and over again.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Michelle, because that comes up.
Okay, I could talk for hours on this, but I'm going to give you as brief, and Holly's she's nodding her head because, you know, I preach on this, that it's a contingency. So it needs to be clear. So, you know, it's what is the contingency? How is it going to be met? When is it going to be met by? And what happens if it isn't met? So you want me to repeat that? What is the contingency? Okay. How is it to be met? When is it to be met? And what happens if it isn't met? So on this particular one, and ORIF doesn't have there isn't a form for that because this is very much a market-driven negotiating strategy. So this is one of those that's market-driven. And so you want your language to be clear and concise. So contingent upon seller finding replacement home by such and such a date. In the event seller does not find this contingency shall be automatically removed, or and here I'm just giving you the options here, will be automatically removed. Contract shall be automatically terminated and all earnest monies returned. So that's the what happens. And those are negotiable things. So what is it contingent upon? How is the contingency to be met? What is the time frame for it to be met? And what happens if it isn't met? So those are sort of the four things that any contingency for anything should have. We had one recently that came across that said, contingent upon mom and dad's review of the property. Didn't say by when, didn't say what would happen if mom and dad don't like it. It just said contingent upon mom and dad's review of the property. What does that mean? So do you see what I mean about contingencies?
So
clear?
Deborah,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt on that. On the example that Michelle gave about finding a suitable replacement property, do you recommend then that in the private remarks, the listing agent puts there the what, how, sorry, my dogs, the what, how, time frame, and what happens if?
Yes.
In that?
Deborah,
Okay.
can I address this? So I had a situation with that exact same thing where in the listing remarks, it said contingent, or not contingent, it just said subject to seller finding replacement property. No timelines, nothing. It just said that in the listing agreement. Agent goes ahead, takes an offer, believes that the offer, I'm sure this is in a different company, believes that the offer is safe, been in real estate for quite some time, believes the offer is safe because it's in the listing remarks and says, I know, I agree with you, says subject to, you know, or whatever, forgets to put that in the contingency. People move up to buy the home. The timeline is set for a specific date. Anyway, it went to mitigation and it did involve some attorneys. The bottom line is those sellers had to move and they had to leave that property. Therefore, they turned around and went back to the agent and asked for the damages that it cost them to rent the new home to, anyway. So just because it says it on the listing doesn't add the protection into the sale contract.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is such a big misinformation out in our industry right now of, well, it said it in the listing. Well, you didn't say it in your offer. So the way I look at it and hopefully make it clearer for my agents is that the listing is actually the original offer by the seller. The seller is saying, here's what I'm offering you to buy. And when the buyer writes their offer, they're writing their offer based on what the seller's information purposes only information is in the listing agreement. So if it's not in the actual purchase and sale agreement, it's not in writing, therefore the purchase and sale agreement is going to override. So
Deborah,
never rely on the listing agreement as something that is included or not included unless you've also included it in the purchase and sale agreement.
So if we get an offer that does not include the seller's contingency to find a replacement property, do we counter or do we just submit an addendum?
Your seller, if they would counter, because that's a counterable matter. I would recommend a counter because, okay, here's another thing. Counter offers are during the term of negotiation. Once all the parties agree is when you're doing addenda and amendment. So remember, while you're in negotiations, always use the counter offer forms or because you're still in the counter offer process. Okay.
Deb, so I always tell
the only time I would use an amendment addendum is if you're writing something in the purchase and sale agreement and you don't have room to put it all, then it becomes a part of the original offer and not a counter offer. Yeah, I'm sorry, Lisa.
No, I was just gonna say, I always tell my agents to always have an ending and a beginning and an end. If you don't see it in your sentence, then rethink that sentence because
Exactly. That's great. Great advice. Yeah. Good. That's excellent. So in on back to contingencies real quick and the contract and the purchase, the offer and counter offers, you want to be very, very clear on that with your agents. And it's a good idea from a defensible position as a supervising managing broker to have in your policies that the agents will not write contract language that is not already in an addendum or in language provided by ORF without prior approval of the principal broker.
Wait, can you repeat that? Sorry, I was writing.
That you're not writing language into the contract that without principal broker approval. They're not attorneys. Once they start writing, when your agents start writing language that is outside the scope of the pre-printed, already approved forms, you're allowing them to cross over into that area of the unauthorized practice of law, especially if they're writing language that legally binds one party or the other. So what I'm saying is in your policies, it should say somewhere that agents are not permitted to provide or to write contract language outside the scope of what are already provided unless submitted to the principal broker. Something like that. I'm rambling a bit on that, but you guys get the point, right? That you're telling them, no, do not write outside of what is provided unless I approve it. Okay, ORF complaints and violations. I'm gonna jettison through these because I want to get to employment law while we have Jeremy, because he's the expert on that. Misrepresentation. Okay, this is just going to be a quick list of some of the areas that the real estate agency has complaints on, and the agents have been found guilty and lost their license or been suspended. So misrepresentation or fraud, doctoring a well test, falsely created a mortgage pre-approval letter. Yep, that will get you to lose your license. In an email, a broker included an engineer stamp and submitted the altered letter with the closing documents without engineer's knowledge. Also changed telephone number by 1 digit on the altered letter to prevent anyone from calling engineer. This is shit that, this is stuff that that people that are in our industry actually do and have thought they could get away with it. You know, no wonder the public thinks we're lower than, never mind. I forgot to tell you today's Deborah Unfiltered.
We love Deborah Unfiltered.
So, using a proxy to complete online education in order to renew license, lying about your continuing education. We've actually suspended a couple of licenses over that, where they said they got their presenting a falsified sales agreement. Creating and presenting a falsified sales agreement, submitting a sales agreement with forged buyer signatures. Think you'll lose your license for that? Working under an informal purchase agreement. There is no such thing. In Oregon, we are subject to the statute of frauds that basically says in order for it to be enforceable in real estate, it must be in writing. Now, there's a couple exceptions to that, but we're going to, you know, for our purposes as supervisors, if it isn't in writing, it doesn't exist. So that's the rule. That is, don't tell me that the buyer and the seller talked and the seller told the buyer that they could move in 3 days early and it's not in writing anywhere. Do you see what I'm saying, where that becomes a problem? The listing property for sale without an owner authorization, lost their license, rightfully so. Okay. Y'all get the Oregon Real Estate Agency Journal every month, or I think it comes out once a quarter now, where us commissioners will write, or our board members, we write articles, but the very last page has the list of everybody who got in trouble. And obviously that's the first page everybody goes to, is to see who got in trouble. Well, that's where some of these are coming from. So here's one that every single month I get a notification from the real estate agency, usually by the 3rd or 4th day of the month, that somebody did not renew their real estate license timely. So as a managing principal broker, if they haven't renewed, you have a duty to send an email directly to them. They must cease and desist any real estate activity, which means you have to remove them from any listing agreements they're on. You have to take over or assign another agent to any transactions they're on. You have to remove any signs that they have on properties. So how an agent in today's world can let their license not be renewed, I don't know, because they have 2 years to get 30 hours. Come on, don't be that agent. So don't get me preaching on that one. So conducting, and then they continue to do real estate without an active license. You will see that almost every single month in the Orange A, there are agents listed for reprimand for continuing to do real estate without a license because they did not renew on time. Interfering with the exclusive agency of another broker. That's where we used to call it in the old days going behind the sign, where an agent would go to a seller and say, hey, you know, you need to cancel that listing and list with me. So that's what that means by interfering with the exclusive agency of another, going directly to the seller. Now there's a couple of exceptions to that, where if failure to respond and you have no But by that time, you've talked to the principal broker and you've agreed, and the principal broker has given you permission to contact their seller. Otherwise, never, ever, ever allow your agents to contact a seller directly. That is not your client. Yeah, okay, so this is what's going to come. Fair to include your RBN. I'm going through these pretty quick, guys. Professional real estate not conducted under the RBN. Okay, this happens every day. Do you do, I do about it once every quarter to 6 months, a compliance audit with my agents. Now, I don't audit them, but I send out a survey saying, are you in compliance? And, you know, and make sure, is your address correct with the agency? Those kinds of things. Yeah, Holly's nodding, yeah. So is your email correct? So making sure. I also send out a notice that, and this is interesting, part of my policy is to have my agents Google themselves, you know, Google yourself and make sure that what's coming up is compliant. You're going to be surprised what comes up and where your agents, you know, I'll randomly Google one of my agents and I'll find that they're still listed under their previous company. They haven't gone through and changed their advertising. They transferred 6 months ago and one of their websites is still showing them with the previous company. That puts them in violation. So part of your supervisory things that you should be doing is compliance with your agents and telling them to Google themselves.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You said you run every 6 months a compliance audit, and can you give us a sheet on that and what that's comprised of?
I sure will. I'll make sure that Katie sends it out. I owe you another sheet. I owe you another document too, the multiple offer spreadsheet that I didn't get to. I apologize.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a very quick survey. It's just like 10 questions. Are you, did you, will you? You know, I'm happy to share that.
And since we're talking about documents for a second, the documents that Carol displayed in the day 2 pre-work, is that actually for next week?
Probably.
Can we get those documents? Because I couldn't find them loaded in online ed.
Okay, Katie, can you, that's administrative. Katie, did you hear that?
I'm sorry, I missed it.
The day 2 pre-work in online ed, I did that 2 days ago. And Carol was displaying some documents starting at about the 1 hour mark. And I was wondering if we could get those. They're not uploaded in the other documents on online ed.
Oh, sure, yeah, I'll be sure to send those out.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we had covered a lot. That's why I kind of sped through these slides, but trust account money handling, not opening escrow right away and holding on to escrow checks. That we have quite a few cases on that where, and remember guys that, and I have to put my principal broker hat on here for you, that your agents need to be part of, or somewhere in your policy it says, agents agree to open escrow with X number of days of acceptance of the offer, no matter what the contract says, okay, that they will get escrow open. Only because a lot of companies I've found, the agents are not opening escrow until contingencies are removed. And I had a serious debate 2 weeks ago with a principal broker of another company that they do not open escrow until until at least the home inspection contingency is removed. Now, I hope no one in this room believes that's okay. When do you open escrow?
Immediately.
As soon as you have an accepted offer, but this principal broker was under the misimpression that you don't have an accepted offer until the contingencies are removed.
So then they're continuing to market it when it's under contract.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, where did that come from? That it's not an enforceable contract until the contingencies are removed. Well, it's still an enforceable contract legally subject to those things happening, but you haven't accepted.
You lost your audio.
Yeah. Oh, you have an accepted offer. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but it's really garbled.
Hold on. Is that better?
No.
No. You sound like a robot man underwater or something really bad.
Katie?
Yes.
Let's, I'm gonna go to phone on video.
Unintelligible.
Okay. Do you remember how to get there?
Which dial do you want me to use?
I don't think it matters. You can just pick one.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
I still hear you through your computer. When you dial in on the phone, it should ask you for like the meeting ID and then your participant ID.
Got it. Is that better? No. So why don't let's take our 5-minute break. And Katie we'll get this squared away. Let's take a quick, on the hour 5-minute break and we'll get this squared away.
It seems to be affecting everybody.
Right.
Yep, so we're just going to take a quick 5-minute break and I'm going to help Deborah get her audio fixed. We'll meet back at 11 a.m.
Yeah, and Katie, yours is fine.
Yep, I'm going to help Deborah get dialed in by phone.
So Katie, I need to dial in one of those numbers from my phone. Is that correct?
Yep, you'll dial in on one of the phone numbers and then you'll listen. It'll be like an automated thing and then you'll type in the meeting ID, which should be displayed right below the phone numbers. And there should be like a participant ID as well.
There it is. Okay, I'll do that right now.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. now. There are 19 participants in the meeting.
Can you guys hear me now?
That is much better.
Okay, so I'm now on my phone and you guys can hear me just fine.
Yeah, you're a little bit quieter than you were before, so you probably just need to pay attention to that, making sure you're speaking loudly, but you're clear.
Okay, I just turned my volume up a little bit. It's my volume is now at 100%.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think as long as you stick close to the mic, you'll be good.
Okay, keep me up next to the mic. Sorry about that, guys. And now my husband decides to mow the lawn. Oh.
Should be
That's late plan.
be thanking him for mowing the lawn.
Yeah, I should be, right? So.
Deborah, do you have the headphones that have the microphone on them?
I do.
Why don't you try and plug those in and see if that works better? You're just a little bit quiet.
Is that better?
100 times better.
Okay, so I've got my headset on. There we go. Are we rocking and rolling? Can I get an amen that you can hear me better?
Yes. Amen.
Thank you, guys.
Deborah, we can hear you better, but while you were fixing that, the comment was made that we'll come back all together. And was there a time given? So I'm thinking maybe people just aren't back yet.
Okay, I'm cool. I gave them 5, so. So we'll start with criminal activity when we get back.
I'm in South Dakota and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm eating my lunch while I'm watching.
Oh my, why are you in South Dakota?
We did a little mini vacation and I got to come and see my son's firstborn daughter, my new grandbaby, finally.
Oh, nice. Fun.
Yeah, it has been an awesome trip. We did Yellowstone and the Mount Rushmore. We went to Deadwood yesterday and had lunch, and it's just been awesome trip. But got to hold my new granddaughter last night, which was pretty amazing.
Aw, that's great.
She didn't like me, but she will soon. She's already 4 months old. I'm like, we had to wait because of COVID and wait till my husband and I got tested and found out we don't have it. We don't have the antibodies. So we just social distance our way all the way here.
So how unpleasant was that test for COVID?
Not bad at all. If you've ever had surgery, You know how they do the test for where they stick the thing up your nose for MRSA, those things?
Mm-hmm.
That's the same.
Ugh, all right, thanks. I've been thinking about going in and being tested because I've had so much contact lately with the public. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I just feel like before I continue on, I need to kind of check it out. Kind of had a sore throat the other day and kind of tired all the time lately. So,
Allergies do that to me. So it makes
that's
me
what I was thinking. I was trying to write it off, but then I thought, what happens if I really have COVID? So maybe I should just eliminate that. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah. I just don't want to.
All right, guys, since that came up, if no one objects, do you mind if we're going to go a little out of the outline, but since it came up and Jeremy's on the phone, I'm going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 because, you know, some of the responsibilities now have changed, and I'll give you a scenario that's happened recently where a family member of an agent in a company tested positive for COVID. Now, what's your duty and responsibility as the company manager owner as far as COVID and the requirements and the protocols? What is your duty and responsibility to the rest of the members of your company or coming into your building or office? Jeremy, I'm going to let you ask you to kind of give some feedback. It's a very close situation to me right now that we're right in the middle of, where a family member of an agent tested positive for COVID. So now that we have knowledge of that fact, what is our duty and responsibilities as principal broker company owners? Jeremy.
Yeah, and that, and this is a tough question. But, I think that the principle that people should be using is that that the goal is to keep as many people safe as you can, and to do what you can to stop the spread of the virus. And so, I think in that situation, obviously one of the first questions would be the timeline, and whether or not the person who works for you has been tested, and whether or not they're in the time frame of when they would test positive for the virus if they had it. So the first step could be, if that employee tests positive the employee tests for the virus and does not have it, then that's great. That's the good first step, because then your employees have no additional risk, or brokers have no additional risk than they would have had even if that employee's family member did not test positive. If that employee does test positive, then if that employee has been or person has been at your office or around other people associated with your firm or your clients, then you really do have a responsibility to inform anyone who has been in contact with that person that they may have been exposed. And all of those people should be encouraged to get tests. Hopefully, everyone's already operating in such a way that is minimizing the amount of interactions between people. I mean, I think one of the very reasons why the advice from the authorities right now is that while you're allowed to do work in office settings, to the degree that people can be working remotely or not being in those settings, that should be done, and it's a best practice, because you're going to minimize the number of people who could be exposed in a situation like this. Whether you should completely shut down, your office, I don't know. I'm not sure the answer to that question. Deborah, I'd be interested in how this is playing out in the situation you're describing.
Well, the principal broker sent out an email to all the other agents informing them without disclosing names that a family member had tested positive, but the agent had not. Just as, just so we were on record of saying, we have knowledge of this. So she felt it was important to let everybody know. And the attorney, she called her attorney, and the attorney said, first of all, you've got privacy issues that you have to be aware of, number one. So the name was not used. However, everybody, nobody can trace it back to her that she said the agent's name. So she was okay there, according to her attorney. But right now it's playing out, not just with this one particular agent or principal broker, but I've heard numerous situations where this has happened, or where an agent went into a listing appointment and found out that the seller had COVID-19. What's the responsibility there? There's so many tentacles from this that spreads out that we as managing principal brokers, we have a responsibility to protect our own first and foremost, and to make sure that in your buildings, in your facilities, that you have in place the proper protocols. They requiring masks. This particular company, they keep the door locked and it's by appointment only, even though the staff is generally there. So all the protocols are in place, which everybody should be doing.
One of those protocols, and we put out guidance on this, including the types of things that should be in your protocols. And one of those things is to have a plan already established for what you will do if somebody was exposed, right? And that's so that when this situation comes up, you're ready for it. Now, in the situation that Deborah described, the actual agent did not test positive. So as I mentioned before, that sort of, that's a best case. I think if the agent did test positive, the most prudent course of action would be to, if you're able to do it, to not have your office open for any in-person things until everybody's been tested and the 2 weeks have passed. And I know that's difficult, and that's not every business can do that. And so, but I think in our industry, it's more doable than it is in others like manufacturing or other things, right? So to the degree, if you knew that someone in your office had tested positive, to the degree that you can say, hey, we're all going to go back to completely remote work for 2 weeks, everyone should get tested, completely do a complete sanitization of the office, and then after the 2 week period, evaluate and start bringing people back if there were no other cases. On the seller buyer stuff, or touring homes, and Deborah's point is right about the confidentiality. You really want to not identify people by name, and in fact, try to do what you can to provide as little identification as possible, or little information as possible that would allow someone to be identified. But you still really do have the responsibility to inform that someone was put at risk or exposed. So I would suggest that a practice would be, if you were in an environment or had put a client in an environment, or were aware of other people that were in an environment because of your real estate activity that may have exposed them, that they should be notified. Now, the reality is that this is an area where public health and liability may or may not be on the same track. In some respects, right, by you sending a notice to someone saying, hey, you may have been exposed to COVID, or you were at a place where someone else had COVID, or you're sort of putting them on notice that they may have contracted it through activity through your work. However, and in generally speaking, it's pretty difficult to be able to trace back where anyone actually got it. It could have been from a grocery store, it could have been from an open house, it could have been wherever. However, it's still the right thing to do because what we have to prioritize in this situation is protecting health and giving people information they need. If someone doesn't know that they need to go get a test, they're not going to go get one, and that person could die later because they didn't catch it early enough. So informing people for public health reasons is the right thing to do. It is unclear down the road how this will all play out from a legal liability perspective.
Right. And
Jeremy?
I will say that go ahead.
So obviously with the offices our size, we've had exposure with agents. And the 3 that I was made aware of were during the actual complete lockdown where we weren't even open, thank God. But one of the agents I spoke with during that time said that she tested, and then the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning got a call from the CDC, not even her doctor, informing her that she had tested positive. And then they required her to provide a list of who she'd been with or around and exposed. And I've been really interested to know if the CDC was notifying people, or if she said they asked her to, but has anybody else heard when they take that list, are they contacting offices or places of business and letting them know that someone there tested that had said they'd been in that location? Has anyone, we haven't had a call, but none of those agents had been in the office.
I mean, the Oregon Health Authority is hired, you know, and the counties have all hired these contact tracers, and what they do is they ask people, who else have you been around? And then they call those people. But their ability to do that is dependent upon the person telling them the accurate information. So that's the thing, is that if whoever caught it didn't remember all of the context they had, or for some reason just didn't want to tell the person who called, then that contact tracer doesn't have the ability to inform others.
Right. So, well, we are a closed office right now, appointment only. We're discouraging agents to come into the office unless it's absolutely necessary, but not telling them they can't. But we're keeping a list of who's there, what day, each day, just so we have that available, just because we know we're, you know, the risk right now in larger offices. But that's it. I just wondered, you know, has anybody been called and told they were exposed?
Not called, but when I was tested, and it was a whole chaos, but mine started out at the very beginning. It ended up not being COVID, but they tried to treat me for COVID, which attacked my diabetes. A whole nightmare. But what they did was they said that because we have showed like 30 houses prior to me going into the emergency room. And at that point, they gave a list to my assistant to jot down all the agents' homes that we saw. And then they were going to get a contact list out. So we didn't have to do anything. Once we gave them the positive or the negative, then they actually go out and contact all those people for us. They had a letter or something, and that's kind of what they explained to me. I needed to know the process so I could give someone else in the office what to do. But that's what they told us, was that we wouldn't have to contact all the other people. We give them the list, they take it, and they send out the letters and then make the contact that way.
Can we make it an office policy that if you tested positive, you'd be required to tell us? I don't think we can we?
Ooh, well, I didn't test positive, so I don't know what the outcome was of that.
Well,
but
I was asking Jeremy, you know, as an office, can we make that part of a COVID policy that if you test positive, you have to let us know?
Yeah, so again, this is an area where it's so new that you have health privacy laws intersecting with COVID mandates and needs, and it's unclear. I would take the so I think that it's unclear, but I would take the if it were me, I would ask for that. I would do that. And there's some risk, certainly, but it's the same thing with temperature checks and asking people when they come in if they're feeling ill. I mean, that has clearly been stated by governmental authorities to be okay to do. You can take a temperature check. You can ask someone if they're feeling sick when they come in and send them home if they have a fever or if they're feeling ill. And so, you know, I honestly, I mean, I would consult with your corporate counsel and with an attorney. I don't think the answer is clear, but you'll have to weigh the costs and benefits. And, you know, I would weigh them one way, but there's probably other opinions out there on that.
So remembering that our overriding topic this last 2 days is risk management. From a risk management standpoint, I see it as two areas that you have of responsibility, and that is to protect the health and safety of your employees, your agents, and any consumer that comes into your facility. And that would also include risk management for open house procedures if your agents are allowed to do them. We discourage them. We don't tell the agents they can't do them because Oregon does allow it. However, you can have a policy that that discourages open houses. There are states in the country that prohibit open houses right now as part of their COVID response. So, you know, right now in Oregon, you're still allowed to do them, but, you know, sometimes, okay, I'm going to give you a saying that I use all the time. Sometimes it's better to do the right thing than to be right. Think about that. But for purposes of risk management, I think discouraging your agents from doing open houses falls under that. And you have to make this individual determination for your company. Is the risk reward worth the doing of the open houses? That's a totally decision on your company policy, because it is allowed in Oregon. Or let me rephrase that. It is not disallowed in Oregon. Right, Jeremy? I wanted to rephrase that.
I just want to be clear on that. I mean, because it's very difficult for me to conceive of what would be a traditional open house meeting the
yes.
Yeah, so
the
it's
COVID requirements.
You know, you still have to keep 6 feet apart at any gathering. Yeah. So I think you have to significantly modify your procedures of what you call a quote unquote open house. You know, if you were to do that by appointment, one family at a time, others waiting outside 6 feet apart, you know, but it's difficult for me to see how you could do a regular open house and meet those requirements.
So
exactly.
Can I share
Michelle?
So our policy,
Michelle, and then
sure. So we just have a policy in our office where it's up to the seller. So the seller can sign a disclosure that says, would they like open houses? No, not at all. Would they like open houses under these protocols where people wear booties, they sanitize their hands, they're 6 feet apart? So basically there's 3 different options. The seller gets to choose that option. And then the people are requested the same questions we would ask anyone when they come in. Have you or your family had any? We don't keep any documentation. So it's just asked at the door. So that's kind of how our company has handled it. Not every seller wants to have an open house. Agents don't have to do them if they feel uncomfortable, but we have set really stringent protocols in mind if they were to do an open house.
Well, let me ask you,
that's great.
If the seller selects an open house without a lot of restrictions on it, do you guys then assert your own restrictions and protocols?
Yes, we still do that. We just make sure that the people that enter, they're comfortable. We'll say this particular seller has selected no protocols. Are you comfortable going in the house? We make sure the other brokers are aware as well.
One thing that we just this week, while I'm on vacation, I had to deal with, we had a seller contact us and complain that there had been several showings, and it was a new listing that was a hot listing. We had, masks required in the private remarks. and seller wanted to allow showings, open house, whatnot. Seller had video surveillance, and seller contacted us and angry because several brokers had come in the house and removed their masks while they were in it. So we had to do a big shout out to the whole company and said, if it says mask required, you have to leave it on. Your clients need to leave it on unless they have a health issue. It surprises me that agents don't, you know, it says video surveillance and it says wear your mask. But we were talking to the seller and she said more than half of them and their clients removed their masks within the first 2 minutes in the house. Seller was not happy, isn't doing showings anymore unless the listing broker's there.
We are our own worst enemies when it comes to this area right now of our business. And if we're not be careful and demonstrating good discernment and complying with the law, we're going to end up getting shut down 100%. We're going to get included in the you shut down, whereas right now we are not. So shame on us if our behavior creates a situation where we put ourselves basically out of business because certain individuals refuse to comply. I mean, none of us like it, but that doesn't give us the right to not do it. I'm sorry, that's just my personal opinion, but. Okay, anything else on COVID? Thank you, Jeremy. It's still a moving target.
Thing, Deborah,
yeah.
Michelle Buck, related to what you were talking about as far as the open houses going, and we have a whole plethora of policies and precautionary measures and so forth that deal with all kinds of things, including people come into our office. One of the things that came up though in discussion was sanitization. And if your brokers are saying, well, and then we'll sanitize the house after we leave, I've got legal advice that says do not do that. Now, if the seller wants to do that, then that's fine. Okay, and they should, but don't put yourself or your principal broker in a position where they're responsible for sanitization, because if something happens, that now you're on the hook.
Absolutely. And what does sanitization mean, really? I mean, to what degree, to what level does it mean?
Right, that's all written up, but I agree with what the gentleman just said. And basically it's all lined out that they'll sanitize their hands with sanitizer before they come in. So if anyone has anything outside that boundary or wants to add more, I totally get it. We're just in weird.
We're doing the best we can in uncharted territory. But remember, our topic is risk management today, so. Okay, let's move on unless anybody has anything else on COVID and how you're managing your risk in light of all this. So we've got a lot of time to make up, so we're going to speed through these for now. Everybody okay? Everybody with me? What is the best process for onboarding a new broker? Going over your policies and procedures and having them sign a copy of it. That's number one. When you bring on a new broker, what details do you provide? I think we've covered that pretty clearly. Do you require it to be signed by each individual? Absolutely. And do you update it annually or as needed? Either one is fine. What brokers want? Okay, this was a result of a survey that the Oregon Association of Realtors did a few years, 2 or 3 years ago. And we sent a survey out and we asked our members, what is it that you want or expect from your principal broker? And babysitting was at the top of the list, just so you know. Herding cats was on the list. So they want you to, professionalism and behavior is to monitor and make sure that everybody's acting professionally, that everybody is ethical, fair, and equal treatment. In other words, as a principal broker, Just because somebody is your highest producer doesn't mean you're going to let them get away with unethical behavior because of production. And that's a pretty common complaint across the industry. Lynn.
Almost chopped up the lawnmower.
Okay, I'm talking, honey. Thanks. Sorry. But yeah, ethical, fair treatment regardless of production level. That was a huge response back. They want a knowledgeable leader. They want to be able to come to you as their leader and know that they can rely on and count on the guidance and the information that you're giving them. They want an advocate on their behalf. You know, I always go to the mat for my agents, you know, advocate on their behalf. We call it have their back. I got your back, you know, I got your back. Now, if you're wrong, I got your back, and then I'm going to kick your butt. But, you know, we're going to have a learning moment, but I am going to have your back. And if you made a mistake, if you did something wrong, we're going to admit it, we're going to own it, and we're going to fix it. But, you know, we're going to do it from that place. They want a trusted advisor. They want access. They want to be able to reach you and to have availability. They want mentoring and problem-solving support. They want a smooth back office administrative workflow. This is what they're telling you they want. Applicable education and tools. Transition from controlled employment to entrepreneurial. This is hard. Do you know 1 out of 5 agents only survive in the first 3 years? So if you look around your office right now, statistically, only 1 in 5 will be left. Statistically, and that's a national statistic. And most of them, finances is the #1 reason that they drop out. So guiding, I actually give my agents when they come on board a copy of or refer them, recommend a copy of Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace, because 2 reasons that we lose our agents, taxes and debt. Those are the 2 reasons that we lose the agents because of their finances. And if you're counseling them and helping them through that, you've become that trusted advisor. Because that's why we lose them, folks. Not because they weren't smart or not because they didn't want to do the work. We lose them because they failed to financially plan their business and to treat it as a business. So again, that's what they want from you. They want that guidance from work an hour, get paid an hour mentality. Work an hour, get paid an hour. My taxes are taken out of that hour and what I get is mine. To that entrepreneurial, I might work 100 hours and not get a paycheck, and that transition into that. Make sense? Because that's what they want us for. They want a friendly and supportive work environment. They want to learn how to make a living. Sales meetings with purpose, frequency, and the content. What are some topics that work well in a sales meeting? Based on what we've covered so far, what are some topics? Just give me 5 real quick. 1, 2, 3. Heather, what's a good compliance? Yay, Heather.
What was the question again?
What are 5 topics? Just give me 1.
Adding to our sales meeting: fair housing, COVID protocols, policy procedures,
advertising.
Amazing. Yep. Advertising, fair housing, compliance. You should be doing those consistently. Identify 3 ways you can increase attendance besides bribery and food.
Our Zoom marketing meetings have been incredible. We're thinking about continuing them because we get so much more attendance through Zoom. It's huge. The difference is incredible versus in person.
You heard that, Sheila?
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Yeah, and make them interesting and valuable. Make it so that they know when they come to that meeting, they're going to leave there with something valuable, not just have a meeting because it's time to have a meeting. So
we try once a month to add a CE class to
Yeah.
a marketing meeting.
That's a good idea. Performance management, we're going to get through this. Are you managing performance, balance between formal and informal? Are you meeting with your agents one-on-one? Production, training and development, reinforce company policy, reviewing policy, content for each meeting, code of ethics. In my meetings every week we cover one article of the code. And so we go through the code 3 times a year. Every week we do one article of the code in our sales meeting. It's a set agenda item on our agenda. So that's and the agents love it. So, and we talk about examples of it. I'm going to problem solving, customer service, mentoring, community interest, compensation. Okay, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because everybody's compensation plans are different. Teams, we've reviewed that. You guys track them with me? Okay, real estate agency compliance and best practices. How do you ensure that brokers follow Oregon revised statutes? Have you created a checklist that is followed for each transaction? Thank God for SkySlope. How many of you use SkySlope or .loop or one of those, you know, online managements, because that really helps. Okay, I want y'all to answer this one. What steps do you take? Risk management, remember that's our topic. Risk management refuses to follow established procedures as it relates to compliance. My biggest one that I fight with agents is not turning their paperwork in on time. That's a big one. So we have a policy in place. 3 strikes, you're out. I mean, the first one, okay, and we even have a fine. I've never fined anybody, but I have it in my policy that that if your paperwork is late, we can fine you. We don't want to fine anybody. It's the accounting nightmare of that. We're probably, Holly, cover your ears. We're probably never going to ever fine anybody, but it's there in case we have to. But remember, that behavior is doing what to you? Putting you at risk, right? It's your life.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. So can you delay paying the sale commission if the paperwork isn't complete? Can I?
If you're,
well,
legally, yeah, legally you can. I mean, legally you can say, you know, we're holding your check until all your paperwork is done, but it has to be in your policy, has to be for how long and for what items are required. I personally have never held an agent's pay hostage. Sometimes it gets delayed in processing, but yes, you can legally, as long as it's clearly set out in your policy and you're consistent with it. You don't use it as a discriminatory factor. But yes, legally you can.
The only thing I would add is just you got to make sure there's nothing inconsistent. It's either directly spelled out or nothing inconsistent in your independent contractor agreement. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And that's what I mean, as long as it's spelled out and you're consistent with it. And okay, well, here's what happens if you get a garnishment on, this kind of goes skipping a little ahead to employment law, but what happens if you're the managing principal broker and you've got an agent who has a closing scheduled in 3 days and you get a knock on your door and you get a garnishment on that agent's money? Then what do you do, Jeremy? I mean, I know what our answer is, but legally what does that principal broker's responsibility become at that time?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I'm not sure I know the answer definitively. My initial take on that question is that as these individuals are not employees and you have a contractual obligation to pay them their portion of the money, that they should be paid, not garnished. But Deborah, what's your policy?
Well, the garnishment comes to the company in the name of the company, and it's money we owe them, and it applies to 1099 as well as W-9, is my understanding. Yeah. If we get served a garnishment, there's a response time. When you get served the garnishment, the paperwork has a response time that you have to respond, and there's questions that you have to comply with. This is an area where if you get a garnishment for one of your employees, the very first thing you need to do is to talk to your legal counsel and have them guide you from an employment law standpoint, from a garnishment standpoint, what are your legal responsibilities. Again, this is one time where I encourage you to don't act until you've got your corporate legal advice on how to proceed, because it might be different. Okay, moving along. Any questions on that? I'm just going through these. Can you keep up? Don't rely on the retain a complete copy. We know that. 6 years. Record storage, electronic has been declared as fine. We no longer have to keep those hard copies of files. Security measures, I'm sure everybody's taken care of that. It's very important. Redact information like Social Security. Nobody should ever have Social Security numbers in their files. How do you destroy documents after 6 years? We hire a professional shredder. That's the best way to do that and document it. Availability and access to the principal broker. I love this diagram of him juggling clocks. Monthly reviews is a good model. Engage all the time with your brokers. Management by walking around, being consistently with them and reviewing policies and procedures. Cross-training your employees is really important in case if you have employees. A lot of you are your only employee, right? How many of you are your only employee and you're the bottle washer and the enforcer? You know, so you got to be fluid. Problem solving, compliance. Personal sales. When your agents, can they do personal transactions? Absolutely. Just make sure you have policies in place, policies and procedures, and Oregon law has some very clear direction on personal transactions. For example, if you're selling one of your own properties, you cannot, under any circumstance, represent the buyer of a personal property that you're selling, or vice versa. If you're buying a property, you cannot represent the seller, and that's an Oregon law. Any questions on that? Okay, supervision of assistants. Good God. You have licensed and unlicensed assistants. Again, where are your directions going to be for supervision of assistants? So according to NAR 13%, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say our supervising should be in our policy on how we supervise, licensed or unlicensed assistants.
Exactly. And in the OAR, not Oregon Association of Realtors, in the Oregon Administrative Rules, there is a list of what an unlicensed assistant can do. And I'm pretty sure that's in your resources as well, of what an unlicensed assistant can legally do for you.
I also just posted in the chat box a link to an Oregon Real Estate Agency Journal article, which lays that out as well.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. That's why you're here. Okay, so criteria for hiring, I think those are all pretty clear. Administrative skills, excellent communication, technology savvy, networker, community knowledge, negotiating skills, lives and breathes excellent customer service. Tasks for a licensed assistant. If you link to that Jeremy put up there, that's going to give you all of these. I'm skipping through these really fast, guys, because we're running out of time. These are all listed in that document. Okay, this is really important though. What can a licensed assistant not do? Obviously, they cannot show real estate. They cannot hold open houses. They cannot perform walkthroughs. They cannot discuss a transaction, any of the elements of a transaction. Yeah, the ORE, the Oregon Real Estate Journal. Give instructions to inspectors, engage in negotiations, engage in real estate marketing or cold calling. We just had a case where the real estate agency got a complaint that an unlicensed assistant was making cold calls on behalf of the agent. Of course, that's not allowed. How should compensation for a licensed assistant be handled? That's totally up to you. There is a lawsuit. Jeremy, here's where I'm going to defer to you for a minute here about making sure your licensed assistant, if they're an independent contractor or an employee, that you're complying with all of those rules. So Jeremy, would you just kind of step in here real quick and talk about that a little bit? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'd say, sorry, do you want me to speak to this question here, particularly on the who pays?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing is for certain, that if we're talking about, and this question is talking about a licensed broker who is acting as an assistant. So just to be clear, an unlicensed broker, or an unlicensed person acting as an assistant, they cannot be paid out of the commission of the agent, right? And so in that instance, while all the supervisory responsibilities, immediate supervisory responsibilities are going to be with the agent for whom that assistant is working for, the payment can't come from that assistant's, or can't come from that agent's commissions, and so there has to be another arrangement for how that person is being paid. So they may be being paid by the brokerage. In the situation of a licensed of a licensed assistant, I don't think that the law is clear on exactly who can or should pay. However, in terms of being consistent with independent contractor status of the broker who's hiring that assistant, the argument would be that they should be paid by that broker because they're really working for that broker as an assistant. However, since they're licensed, they are arguably under the supervision of the principal broker. So I'm not sure that the law is really clear on exactly how you do the payment if it's a license. And I think there's argument on both sides. Deborah, I'm curious how you guys handle that.
Well, if they're a licensed assistant and they're a 1099, we pay right out of commissions because we legally can, and that's, you know, perfectly fine. If they're paid as an employee of whoever they're assisting, we pay them and then they pay their assistant based on, because we are not going to use commissions to pay hourly amounts.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But this is
But
an
again,
area,
that's all.
it's really, and we're going to get employment stuff, but you know, this is an area where it's really good to at least have on hand an employment law expert that you can consult with, or if you have a payroll agency that provides that as a service, or you have an insurance policy that provides that as an ancillary service, where you get access to employment and HR expertise. That this is a good thing to consult with them on to make sure you're just handling that all properly.
Absolutely. I think from a risk management standpoint, if you have employees or if you're allowing your agents through their LLCs to have employees or as individuals, that you have clear company policy on what that looks like and who's liable for the payment of those employees, and it's clear who the employment relationship is with. For example, as the company, I am not the employer of your assistant, and that has to be made very, very clear, and that's good in your policies and procedures.
The problem will come though too is this is assuming that this assistant is not doing any licensed real estate,
right?
But if they're licensed,
right,
then they're capable of doing professional real estate activity. And so if you allow them to start doing that, then you all of a sudden cross over into a whole new world here where you were trying to just have an assistant, an employee-employer relationship with a particular agent around that assistant. And now, if they're doing anything that actually crosses into professional real estate activity, it blows up that whole model. And now your principal broker is going to be, liable and responsible for certain activities there. And there's duties about reporting to the principal broker. And so you just have, if someone's called an assistant, whether they're licensed or not, you really have to keep close bounds on that they're not crossing over into any professional real estate activity.
Exactly. All right, moving on. E&O insurance. Hopefully everybody in the room carries E&O insurance, even though in Oregon it is not required or mandated. It covers your, I'm not even going to ask this question. I was going to ask, raise your hand if you have it. I'm not going to embarrass anybody by doing that. It covers your E&O, it stands for errors and omissions. So it's not going to cover fraud or misrepresentation. It's going to cover you and your agents when, or if you're sued. Pays for damages and defense costs when you're accused of negligence. Most policies have 100,000 to 5 million limits. And some Oregon E&O insurance policies provide additional coverage. So who's going to be your source for this information? Make sure you have a really good insurance broker to make sure you're covered. Okay, what does E&O not cover? And from a risk management standpoint, this is more important, I think, than what it covers. And it does not cover bodily injury and property damage. An example of that was we had a buyer looking at a property, missed a step and fell on the property, tried to go after the E&O, but what really was the coverage there? The homeowner's hazard and liability policy was the one that eventually covered that accident, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, that'd be my thought anyway, Deb, is it's going to be the liability of personal property.
Right, of the seller. Yeah. It doesn't, your E&O does not cover dishonest or criminal or fraudulent or malicious acts.
Right. That's right, yeah.
Bankruptcy doesn't cover bankruptcy, doesn't cover liability of others Doesn't cover warranties, guarantees, for example. Infringement of copyright. Go back to those pictures. Remember that if you get sued for infringement of copyright, your E&O insurance is not going to protect you on that. That's where you might want to make sure you have an umbrella policy that covers you overall. E&O common claims. This is where your E&O policies most commonly are brought in. Appraisals, mortgage principal brokering, property management, broker-owned properties. The E&O claim categories: fraud, breach of contract, negligence, open house and showings, bodily injury, property damage. These are additional coverage that you can get. Misrepresentation regarding the condition of the property, the CPA, Consumer Protection Act. Hey guys, I'm speeding through here. Earnest money disputes, misrepresentation regarding flooding, misrepresentation regarding the value of the property. I'm not going to ask you to do this. Write a procedure statement that clarifies the brokerage and individual broker responsibility, how much the E&O deductible is. How much is, do your agents know how much the deductible is and what they're liable for? How much is the deductible applied? Who pays if a guilty verdict is declared? Best practices: follow the claims reporting process. And what I found with E&O, I'm going off script here, I'm sorry, but is sometimes the E&O company is going to settle even though you know you're right. Once it goes to the E&O company, you have no control over how it's settled out, or if it goes to court, or if they decide to pay it instead of move forward to defend. The E&O company is going to control that. Contact your E&O carrier as soon as possible if you know or have any indications that you might have something that's going to be a problem. If approved, try to mitigate the damages. Going fast here, guys, you with me? Gain all relevant facts and document all conversations. Always, always, always. That's just good business. Place everything in chronological order. You should be doing this anyway. This is where your file and keeping your file and your contemporaneous notes and everything, all your conversations that you have in your file. I want you to train your agents and think of your file as your defensible position in court. If a judge looked at your file, would your file tell the whole story and defend your actions? Sorry. So from a risk management, this is where your agents need to understand the importance of complete documentation of your files. Yeah, do not pay anything yourself or settle anything yourself without going through your E&O or your attorney. Review the claim at a sales meeting. Okay, that's a teachable moment. Okay, well, we're at lunch of day 1. How was your lunch? We're moving on. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. We are so behind, it's crazy. Because this is, we should have had 8 hours to cover this, and they put it into 6. So we're doing 8 hours in 6 hours, and I might ask for some additional time from Carol next Friday. Everybody okay with that? If I ask for additional time with Carol next Friday? Yay. So
I may not be
So
able to
based on
do
what-
that.
Huh?
I may not be able to do that. I'm
No,
just
no,
letting-
no, it's not, no, it's not taking any time from you. It's me taking some of Carol's teaching time next week. It's
I
not
see.
adding time to you.
Oh, I see.
No,
Okay.
no, no.
Because I have
No,
some
no.
stuff scheduled. Okay, good. Thanks. Bye.
No. We would never do that to you. This is just me stepping on Carol's time. I'm going to borrow some time from Carol. How's that sound? So what are 3 areas regarding the law that you feel are your biggest areas of exposure from a risk management standpoint based on what we've discussed so far? Just shout them out.
Lack of disclosure.
Misrepresentation.
Misrepresentation, lack of disclosure. Anything else? Rogue advertising, that's what think of it this way. What keeps you up at night? What do you wake up at night and go, holy crap, I hope they're not doing that? What keeps you up at night? Heather, I know, I see you laughing. What keeps you up at night that you just go, ah?
Social media advertising, for sure.
I know, for sure.
And the lives scare me because we have a ton of them doing lives, and we don't really have a policy on that other than, our normal, act professional and behave yourself one, but that keeps me up. I mean, we have a management team and we're constantly texting each other. Did you see what so-and-so just did? Did you take care of it? Did you? I mean, it's constant.
Yes. Anybody else before we move on to antitrust? Okay, we're done at I think we're scheduled till noon, but I may go a little longer. Everybody okay? If we go 15 more minutes and I'll get through antitrust, we'll do it quick.
I'm sorry, I have to leave at noon. I have an appointment pending.
I'm sorry, I do
Okay.
too. I can't stay.
All right, well,
longer.
let's do this. The antitrust quiz is in your book. Before next Friday, take that quiz. It's in your book. It's on page 37 of your book. And then we will we'll discuss that next Friday. I'm going to plead with Carol to give me some time from her section 2, which is business operations. Does that work for y'all?
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are amazing. You're just so engaged and involved, and I think a lot of the learning has come from each of us collaborating and learning from each other. So I will be back next Friday, just if nothing else, for an hour. And you're free at any time to reach out to me. I'll have Katie give you my direct email or my phone number, and I'll make sure that we get those couple of things out to you: my compliance questionnaire and the multiple offer grid that I use. So, any final questions or comments before we wrap it up for today? Anything for the good of the order?
No, but thank you
Lisa.
for putting this together and working so hard to make it presentable.
Yes, for
Oh,
sure.
you're welcome, John. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments or good of the order? Okay, well, everybody go out and stay safe and COVID-free, and we'll see you then. See you next Friday. Bye,
Okay,
guys.
sounds good. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you, Deborah. Great class.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next Friday.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks, guys. Bye.